All right, welcome to the podcast. We have my good friend Michael. He is the co-founder and CEO of ZeroGravity, also known as 0G, and we'll probably be referring to as 0G for the rest of the podcast. And he is the man for the company itself, the host of the podcast. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into this wonderful Web3 world? Essentially, what was your come to crypto moment?
Well, first of all, excited to be here and kind of hosting this podcast. And my journey into Web3 was actually I've known about Bitcoin probably since 2010. Heard about it on some type of show, but didn't really engage with Bitcoin until about 2014 when I basically was in graduate school and people were talking about it. My classmates were saying like, hey, you should check out this Bitcoin thing. And then I heard Mark Andreessen talk about it. And then I was what was known as a DFJ fellow then. So spent some time with Tim Draper. And you also said like, hey, check out this Bitcoin thing. And finally bought some and then totally got hooked, read a lot of white papers, did the whole ICO boom 2016 onwards, and recently also invested. But then from an entrepreneurial journey perspective, that then started intersecting with the joy that I found from the explosion of creativity that was happening in the Web3 space. And so got a call late 2022 from my classmate at Stanford, and former classmate, I guess, at Stanford. And he basically said like, hey, 5 years ago, I invested in Conflux and being in fun, wanted to do something more global scale. Are you interested in connecting with them? And I was like, I've been waiting on a call for that, like that, and let's chat. And then 6 months of co-founder dating later, I basically came to the conclusion that they're the best engineers I've ever worked with, and we need to start something. So it really started with the team from an operator perspective. So investor to operator, really driven by kind of personal passion around the explosion of creativity in the Web3 space.
So you do the co-founder dating, you find your great engineers, and tell us a little bit about. So you find the engineers first. Did you guys already have the idea for ZeroGravity when you met, or was it an iteration process where you guys kind of decided to go for blockchain AI? Tell us a little bit about like the ideation process.
Yeah, it started with the team itself first before we actually came to the idea. Because initially we just wanted to understand, are we compatible? Do we think we have a similar leadership style? Do we look at the world very similarly? Do we have complementary skills that we bring to the table? How do we make decisions? How do we resolve conflict? So all of those type of questions I wanted to get out of the way. And then secondarily, we then started looking into, well, does it, what are some ideas we could potentially target? Like, do we have any good ones? And initially, we actually thought about, well, why don't we build an interoperability protocol? Because we personally were experiencing this whole issue of like, oh, we have to like bridge assets and you have to hold assets on multiple chains. And isn't there a better way of doing this? And so that was actually one of our first ideas before really diving deeply into Web3 meets AI. And then we just did some quick kind of user testing around it, and all of that just fell flat. Like nobody cared. They were like, "Yeah, I'm using like layer 0 on this, or this thing worked." And then we went back to the drawing board and said, "Okay, let's now actually explore this in earnest and really think about what's the intersection of A, what are we passionate about? B, what do we have a lot of domain expertise in? And C, what's a major unlock for this space as well?" And then that's how we found our way to AI meets Web3.
Yeah, and for people that are unfamiliar with ZeroGravity, 0G, what is the mission? Because you guys come upon this AI blockchain space, but what is the solution you're bringing to the table? Because many people hear AI plus blockchain, they just think buzzword. So tell us a little bit about what you're building.
Yeah, and I should probably give a little bit of the background on myself and the rest of the team. So I started on the engineering side. I was an engineer at SAP Labs, and later Microsoft, moved to a technical product manager role, and then more to the business side, worked for a Bain company, and then Bridgewater Associates on the portfolio construction side, and then started my first Web2 company when I was going through graduate school. And basically scaled that up to 650 employees, close to 100 million in contracted AR at one point, raised about 130 million for it. So it was a top YC and unicorn company at its side. and then, of course, started 0G. And so I used a lot of AI during my Web2 days with my company Garten, because we had this issue of we've got all these different service providers we need to manage, and they were calling things very differently. So, for example, we provided some nutrition services. On the nutrition side, people would call something like 1 gallon milk or 1G milk or just milk, and then or the brand plus milk. And so managing, tens if not hundreds of providers that are providing this, we had to find some way, like, how do we streamline this and build a system that's actually really intelligent? So we utilized machine learning algorithms to basically clean all of that up. And so I was pretty familiar at that point with the power that AI held. I was like, oh, this is so cool. We can literally automate 99.9% of what human beings would have had to do with a really painful process. And so firsthand experienced some of the power there. Now, when it comes to Ming and Fan and Thomas, Ming wrote some of the first AI algorithms at Microsoft Research for Microsoft Bing. And so he did a lot of work and research on graph neural networks and many other types of neural networks. And so he was very familiar with kind of the industry. And then Fan worked together with him on some of those papers as well. So a lot of familiarity in the space. And so then eventually we came to basically building what we now call the fastest modular AI chain, where essentially if you compare kind of closed AI on one side, which you don't exactly know what type of model you're being served, where the data came from, how the data was cleaned, who's making the censorship decisions. You're just trusting like one authority that, don't worry, we'll take care of everything, we'll take care of the alignment and all of these things, just trust us. Versus kind of more the other aspect, which is more this trustless and democratized AI that we're building in the Web3 space, where you can just verify yourself. How do we build a stack that actually gets you to not need to make any trust assumptions, but to say, I can actually really see where all the data came from. This was the origin, the provenance of it, and then let's follow it through. So to build that system, we then saw, okay, we need the data infrastructure that's designed for that. When we looked at the space, like fast data ingestion and retrieval rates were not a thing. So we needed to build our own storage network. Then on top of that, if we wanted to do certain things on the AI side, like eventually on-chain training, the data throughput needs to be there. Like Ethereum does about 80 kilobytes per second in throughput. If you look at InfiniBand, it's anywhere from 40 to 400 gigabytes per second. So it's like a huge gap. It's like a million times. So how do we build the data infrastructure that can actually support those types of scales? And that's really where we built the data availability layer. So it's the kind of second product that we built. And now we're starting to go more closer to the execution stack, where we're building a serving framework so that you can register as an inference node or a fine-tuning node, and then offer those types of service in a completely trustless, decentralized manner to other users. So that was a little bit of a longer overview, but I just wanted to make sure there's a lot of context.
No, I think that was a great explanation. And you mentioned, kind of leading into my second question, is what are some of the core problems that 0G aims to solve? So it seemed like there was data provenance, which I really struggle with pronouncing that word. Then there was the kind of the data throughput, where how blockchain is currently set up, there's not enough data throughput to support these large language models or other models for that instance. And there was a final problem that you kind of identified as well.
So coordination as well. And we can certainly, if you want, touch upon all the cases of where it makes sense to actually have Web3 meets AI, and then the other way where AI can actually intersect with Web3 and support a lot. But yeah, the other part is just coordination. How do you create something that's completely decentralized and trustless? Because I'll give you an example. So I think about 10, 20 years from now, we'll start having AI agents run what I call societal use cases. So it could be a logistics system or a manufacturing system or some type of governance system, completely automated. In that case, wouldn't you want to know how that agent was trained? Like where did the model come from? Where did the data come from? Were there any malicious attacks on the decision-making of that model? Like in real time, is anything happening to that model? What version of the model are you being served? So all of those types of questions, I don't want to just trust some entity. I want to be able to just verify that, and I want it to be on a Web3 network, so it's completely open for people to verify. And so in that case, I would then feel comfortable with, for example, cryptoeconomic incentives and slashing or disincentive mechanisms that this agent is going to behave honestly. Like in a centralized case, if it's a very smart agent, they're like, oh, let me figure out how I can fool these humans so I can get all the rewards without doing any of the work. And so that can easily happen in a blockchain setting.
And because we just introduced a new term, let's quickly define what is an AI agent. I think most people can intuit it, but maybe on just a very basic level.
Yeah, so the model itself is essentially, and oftentimes when we refer to model in this case, it's LLMs, but there are many other types of models. There's graph models and so on. So we won't need to get too deep into the distinction, but when an LLM, you essentially use a large set of data to pre-train a model to then run some type of statistical process to interpret some type of prompt. So you tell it like, what's 2 plus 2? And then the LLM looks through its entire kind of training set and then decides, okay, I can use my reasoning and say like, okay, 2 plus 2 is 4, based on all the examples that I've studied and all the parameters that I have. And now an agent basically just uses this underlying model, but it's kind of in a very specific prompting manner answers things from that perspective. So an agent could be a personal assistant. It could be something that runs an entire process in a company, like, I don't know, accounting, for example. It could be a lawyer's assistant. So it all just depends on how you prompt it. Because with some of these really large models, you've got so much training data that if you don't confine it to some very specific domain, you might get answers that are totally irrelevant to what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's talk about some of the key features and innovations that Zero G is bringing to the market and kind of how it stands out from these other AI blockchain projects, because you see a few of them popping up.
Yeah, the first is that we're marrying both really deep chain and blockchain level expertise with hardcore AI expertise as well. So we have a VP of blockchain, we've got a VP of AI, and then kind of all of us on the founding team have both blockchain and AI experience. So that's key, is that we have that experience in place. Then two, what stands out is we really care about kind of being the fastest, most programmable, most secure across these different types of dimensions, whether it's on the storage side or on the DA side or on the serving framework side. So it's really all about performance. So on the DA side, just to use that as an example, the traditional DA systems do anything from, let's say, 1 to 10 megabytes per second. So that's kind of like the state of the art. But that's totally insufficient for AI workloads, as I mentioned. And so per custom consensus layer, so in our V2 of our mainnet, we're expecting to have speeds of 50 gigabytes per second per consensus layer. So many orders of magnitude difference in terms of what's available today. Now, why does that matter? It matters because A, you can support extreme use cases, but you can really build anything now in a decentralized context that you can in a centralized context. So it doesn't just have to be AI, but could be an on-chain game that uses AI. Like, let's say, Fortnite completely on-chain is now possible because you have that throughput and that data bandwidth.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about decentralized AI and why is it very important today? I think most people have this feeling, especially coming from the crypto space, that these large centralized entities aren't always to be trusted, or maybe don't always have our best interest, or maybe just have their own economic interest at heart. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of decentralized AI and why is it important that we really get this solved soon.
Yeah, we could definitely spend the entire hour talking about it and going really down the rabbit hole. But let me start from the high level. So there's kind of a key value proposition around, first of all, tokenization and incentivization. So that's one key area that Web3 can bring. Then there's this whole provenance, which we already talked a little bit about. The third area is coordinating underutilized hardware. So like storage, GPU, and so on. Then there's the whole aspect of verification. Then the next section would be things like privacy preservation type of technologies like FHE or ZK. Then there's the censorship resistance because it's decentralized by nature. And then finally, there's security impacts that could be significantly stronger than in a centralized setting. So those are the key areas. We can definitely dive into each one of them and why they matter. But then I'll mention another area where AI coming into Web3 is also going to bring a lot of positivity. So, for For example, you can abstract away a lot of poor user experiences like bridges and wallets and so on by having AI agents actually doing all of the work for you. So how cool is it if you can just prompt an agent to, hey, buy me this thing on this chain, or swap this thing for me, or in fact, like use this DF for me and do X, Y, and Z. So a completely different user experience because you're starting to operate more at the speed of your thoughts or your voice than, hey, let me click through this thing and let me wake up and spend like 30 minutes transferring this asset to this bridge and then that bridge and then swapping this asset again. So completely different user experiences. So that's a really quick overview. I'm happy to dive into any of these sections and go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, let's take each one by one. So data provenance, that word I can never pronounce, is I think we've seen it pop up a little bit with some of like OpenAI, where people are like, hey, you've taken our data to train these models and there's been no compensation of, say, either the news company or the creators themselves. Talk us a little bit about, provenance and why this is an important problem to solve.
I'll use a simple example. So if you have a model and all the model was trained with was how to build a bomb, then the type of output you would expect from the model is like very similar. So the training data is actually quite important. Like the quality of the training data really matters in creating a kind of great model and agent over time. So by utilizing the data provenance perspectives, you can then have guarantees that you know where that data actually came from. And so that's the issue with when you have a closed AI system. They don't want to disclose it because oftentimes it's IP protected data as well. That's part of it. And so with a more of an open kind of democratic permissionless system, you have data transparency, the data authenticity, where it was actually created. You can do things like IP management and attribution. You can even then go further and say, like, let me actually fingerprint deep fakes as well that are being created. So I know which things were created by a human versus some type of model or agent.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And let's talk a little bit about some of the short-term and long-term goals for ZeroGravity. Like obviously you guys have the data availability layer. I've even heard you guys talk about trying to make an operating system for AI itself. So talk to us a little bit about some of these like intermediate and short-term plans and then the long-term vision for ZeroG.
Yeah, short term, moving towards mainnet. And so we're on testnet V2 right now. So very much excited about it running stably and doing a lot of improvements now that we've got a lot of usage against the testnet, a few million transactions a week. So really, really excited about all the builders that are building on top of us. But things like documentation improvements, stable RPC nodes, and so on. So that's the short-term focus, is anything that we require to create a really great developer and end-user experience for the mainnet. And after that, releasing things like the decentralized serving layer that I mentioned. So we'll release with the storage and the data availability layer. Then will be the decentralized serving framework. And then we'll start going, further down the execution stack over time, and maybe even look at something like decentralized training. But that's very much in, like research phase at this point. And really what that amounts to is the serving layer is a key component to building this idea of a democratic or decentralized AI operating system, because what do operating systems do? They coordinate underlying resources so that then the end user can enjoy the benefits. And so, for example, in a serving framework, if you register as a depend node and you provide some GPU compute, or you register as an inference node that's utilizing other types of resources, you can really be the glue that brings it all together. And the end user benefit is that instead of going to like 50 different solutions, you just have one place, and that place does all of your needs. So you have the kind of like the closed AI stack. You've got all of the functionality in one place, but what's under the hood is that there's many different providers actually supporting that solution.
Yeah, and then we talked about some of the long-term goals, but in terms of what's most interesting to you about this intersection of AI and blockchain and how you guys are really enabling it. So it seems like you're building this like underlying technology stack that, builders can come in. And what do you hope that they do? They download the ZeroGravity SDK, and they can just easily plug into this operating system for AI?
Yeah, our mission is to basically make AI a public good. And so everything that we do is aligned with this mission because we don't want to live in a world where literally all of commerce can be run by 5 companies because with AI, the marginal cost of intelligence over time can literally go close to zero. And so you can start automating pretty much every functions when you have humanoid robots come into the field. McKinsey, for example, estimates 70% of all business processes can be automated. I think it can be a lot more given what I'm starting to see. Things, for example, on automating even very complex code bases with AI. And so we need a system that we can trust and has our best interests as human beings embedded into that very infrastructure of the system versus just saying like, hey, I'm going to trust, one specific company to deliver that for us. And that's a loose assumption because it's how can we trust that company if it has monopolistic tendencies to want to control of commerce, and then who's reaping the rewards from that? How are we as human beings then going to interact in a system like that?
Yeah, I was very surprised towards the end of my career at Google. We got something that was very similar to Copilot, and it would literally fill out entire blocks of code. And then all the rage lately has been cursor AI. I don't know how
Yep.
much you guys have been playing around with these code generations, but it's quite startling how much the advancements are in AI. So what are you personally seeing as someone deep in the industry in terms of these advancements? Like you mentioned, McKinsey saying over 70% automation.
Daily on my X feed, I see a new video pop up about like, hey, my 8-year-old built this thing within an hour. And so, yeah, that's actually quite fun to see. It reminds me a lot of when I was getting started with programming and how much fun it was. And so it's amazing. I mean, I just had a baby myself, so my daughter is going to be basically blockchain and AI native, and she's not going to know a world where she was like, "Well, what really? You had to actually type in a bunch of things, and you sat in front of a computer for many hours, like building this program. Like, why? That doesn't make any sense." It's going to feel to us like tape players or like CDs back in the past. And so I think that's super exciting to see the quick advancement in the space.
Yeah, you see it in code. You see it in so many things. I'll even admit this. I'll walk around my house and just send voice notes back and forth from ChatGPT for like ideas on business things, on like creativity. It's quite incredible how pervasive it is, and it'll be interesting to see, yeah, how much your children adopt it.
Yeah, and it feels so natural as well. I remember when Siri first came out on the iPhone, I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like I can change the voice, and now I have an assistant that has, I don't know, like a British voice or something, and it's pretty cool. But then now Siri seems like it's super outdated now that I can chat with, like ChatGPT 4.0 or other models. And it's just phenomenal. For example, I just spent 20 minutes just chatting with ChatGPT about like nutrition profiles and what to worry about for newborns and so on, and pretty cool answers. So it's brave new world.
It really is. So let's talk a little bit about some of the notable partnerships and collaborations. You mentioned a few earlier, but let's talk about like who you all are working with and excited to continue to grow with.
We're super excited that we have over 300 projects already building on top of us, and it's all across the AI stack. We've got a lot of infrastructure companies building on top of us, a lot on the DePIN side, also on the kind of gaming DeFi side. So it's a really exciting base at 0G. Maybe some that we're quite excited about. We just recently did an integration with the Optimism stack, and so one of the key alt DA providers. And so that was quite fun to build together on the OP Plasma stack. So that's super fun. And then there's some kind of models that are building on top of us, like Pond, which is doing a large graph model. And then partnering with the likes of Sentient, for example, that's also trying to build community-owned models. And then many in the works that you'll see announcement of in the future, but just very small, tiny preview.
Very exciting. I know everyone will be on the edge of their seats to check out who ends up signing with you guys. So talk to us a little bit about how the community can get involved. Obviously, we're here talking on a podcast that will be going out to all the podcasters, but talk to us a little bit about some of the other community engagements you guys have planned.
Yeah, we try to be available on multiple channels. So Discord's very active, and if you have any questions, we've got great community managers, our technology teams there. I check in on kind of our meme game. There's always some really fun memes around. So Discord's a great way to engage. I'm pretty active on X as well, and I usually go to most Web3 conferences to just engage with our local community too. So any builders, any node providers, really anybody in the community, always feel free to show up to one of the events and that I'm speaking at, and happy to engage. So that's a nice way to engage. But really, we're available on every channel: Discord, X, Telegram.
Yeah, now we're about to get a little bit meta, so we're about to talk about the podcast on the podcast. So what are some of the hopes you guys have about this ZeroGravity's podcast? I know we wanted to be, a primer on decentralized AI, a go-to resource for people that want to learn about AI on chain. Talk to us a little bit about some of the hopes you have for this content, the podcast itself, and the content that ZeroG is already putting out, be that newsletters or blogs.
Yeah, the key for us is really to build a community that is opposed to this idea of this closed AI system. Because on this kind of trustless, democratized AI system, we need a village, need a big community to build, because it's very hard to just do it all as one company. And so our goal is really to be the connective tissue in this space. And so this podcast is just the first not the first, but one of the key representations of that vision. And so we want to feature a lot of builders in our ecosystem. For example, we have a large 12-company accelerator class that's soon going to demo day, which we're really excited about. And so we want to feature some of the builders from there, or feature some of our partners, feature some of our great community members, and then keep people both informed as well as excited about what's to come, and really be a strong voice for this new vision of a not closed AI system.
Absolutely. I think everyone's very excited about that. So finally, tell people where they can interact with you personally online, where they can get involved with some more things that ZeroGravity is doing online.
Yeah, easiest is to just direct message me on X, or to find me on the Discord server, engage with our community that way. Those are probably the fastest ways to engage with me. If you happen to be in any of the locations that I'm traveling to for the conferences, definitely IRL is super fun too. So I'm at KBW, so in Korea this week, and then I'll be in Singapore for Token 2049, and then I'll be at Masari Mainnet in New York a little bit later. So always happy to meet up in person, of course.
Absolutely. So if anyone had any doubts, Michael is definitely racking up the frequent flyer miles, but everyone go engage with Michael online on Twitter. Go to Zero, and that's Zero, the numeric Zero with the G.ai. If people are listening, I will also put the links in the description, and go and get involved with ZeroG. Go subscribe to this podcast, because if you're listening this far, you must really like us both. So to everyone that's excited about the future of decentralized AI, keep on the podcast journey with us. Thank you all for listening.